All right. So we are now ready to look at the more advanced contemporary theory that explains the gender division of labor. It's not like that old-fashioned 1950s sad theory, men are better at this, women are better at that. No. This is the new theory. And we're going to use the model of comparative advantage. And we're going to use our PPF. So to start with, you know what you need for a PPF? You need resources. In this case, let's say 10 hours a day, labor resource. And you need two goods. This is a woman who has 10 hours a day, and she can use it to go earn a job, $20 an hour. Or she can work at home, and when she works at home, the equivalent of the labor she supplies when she cleans the house, when she does the dishes, she takes for the children, whatever, it's the equivalent of $20 a day if they paid for it, right? Pretty much equivalent. Here is your PPF. If she spent her entire 10 hours a day, $20 an hour, 20 into 10, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 20, 40, 60, 80, 100, 200. Took her whole time to be a full-time worker. That's what she'd get. If instead she decided to do part-time work or not work at all, and she decided to spend her time taking care of the kids, cleaning the house, doing the laundry, the equivalent would be $20 value for her unpaid labor if you had to pay for it in the open market. $20, $40, $60, $80, $100, $20, $40, $60, $80, $100, $200. She could take her entire 10 hours, be a stay-at-home wife, stay-at-home mother, stay-at-home spouse, do her time doing unpaid labor. That would what it would be worth. Constant returns to scale, straight line. Dollar to dollar, that's the cost, opportunity cost. For every dollar of unpaid labor, she has to give up a dollar of paid labor. Fine? This, depending on her needs, if she was single and there was no family involved, she could just decide to divide between them 10:10, like 5:5, 5 hours to 5 hours, 100:100. She could decide to do 15 hours paid labor, 5 hours unpaid labor, whatever. Now, she's swiping right, left, right. And she's checking comparative advantage. Now, under absolute advantage, the first thing we know is if the guy can earn more than $20 an hour paid, let's say $40, way better than her at earning an income, and he's completely crap at cleaning up behind him, at doing dishes, at washing clothes. So the amount of value he provides if he's actually doing work at home, this is absolute. advantage. Absolutely. He is better than her at paid work. Absolutely. He is worse than her at unpaid work. Or conversely, absolutely, she is worse than him at paid work. She is better than him at unpaid work. Now, obviously, in this case, he should do paid work, she should do unpaid work, and they should trade. They'll both benefit. Because for every $20, he's going to bring in $40. For every $20 of unpaid labor, he's only going to bring in $10. No brainer. No brainer. But this is not today's world. Let's start with our 21st century feminist guy. He is as good as her. He is just as good as her. He knows how to cook. He knows how to clean. He does his laundry. He is as good as her. Our feminist guy. But, because of sexism, not at home, because he's a great guy, but in the marketplace. Not because he's bad, but because, it's just the world. It's just reality. He gets twice as much as her. So this is our first case where men can be feminist in the interpersonal space. They're just as good as women. They are totally ready to care for the kids. They cook, they clean, they're great. But because of sexism outside the house, he's getting paid more. So using our theory of comparative advantage, I want you to do the work of figuring out who should do what. Draw your opportunity cost, do your technical stuff, and what you should get. I'm going to pause here. Few minutes for you to decide what should happen. 2 minutes. Coming back. Who should do what? Here you are. Modern, contemporary, totally great couple. He's great at housework. He's getting paid more than women because of sexism in the marketplace. End result, comparative advantage. Who specializes in what? Your result should be women will still specialize in unpaid labor and do all the housework, and men will specialize in paid labor. This is a situation where the guy can be as nice as he wants, but look at this. Opportunity cost. 20-20 for the women versus 40-20 for the men. What should the family do? So that's one. What about the other way around? We know that women are going to college at higher rates than men. We know that women are really good when it comes to being doctors, nurses, lawyers, whatever. We're just as good as men. The previous example where was the men was better than us in the labor market, right? What about this example where the men, we are just as good? This is mentorship, right? Be a pilot, be a doctor, be the president of America. If you're a woman, you can do the same as men. other way around. So in this case, the women and the men are both earning the same amount. We started with $20. Let's just stick with that. We're both just as good. So in the previous one, the men were better than us at earning an income. In this one, we are just as good as them. 20th century women. We are as good as men. Except when it comes to caring for children, for taking care of the house, for doing household labor, for ensuring that the groceries are done, the men are just not as good as women. So the women are still 20-20, and the men in this case, they're still 20. They're not better than the women at that, but they're worse than the women at caring for the house. And I'll tell you, I remember my dad would say, I'm gonna cook. And then when he would cook, it would be like this production. He would start at 3, 4. He would be like, I'm going to do a special meal. Then he would look for like spices that weren't there. The children were dying. The children needed to eat by 6. My dad was like generating dishes on dishes. Then my dad would be like, oh, I need this special variety of Indian spice. Where is it? 3 people would have to run to gather that Indian spice. Then he'd be like, okay, the dinner will not be ready till 8:30. The children who are like 10 years, 6 years, they need their food. Dishes are generating everywhere. So there is a way in which he was kind of incompetent. Well-meaning, trying his best, but kind of incompetent. Really not that good at actually generating unpaid labor outputs, right? In his case, it would take him hours to generate one meal. In that case, while the women and the men are just as good when it comes to paid labor, it turns out the men just not that good at taking care of children, taking care of the families, right? Opposite situation. So I want you to work out the PPF and tell me what's going to happen in this situation. And we're going to end with the third case. But yeah, we started with our base scenario. Our second scenario was where both men and women were as good and as decent 21st century at taking care of the household, but one of them was getting paid more, and it wasn't the men's fault that there's sexism in the labor market. That's just what is. All right? So there you go. And then the reverse case was the men and the women were both equally smart in earning an income, but the men were just not as good as the women at taking care of the family. I'm going to give you a third case. Let's say women are better than men at everything. Feminist class. I'm going to start there. I'm not going to say men are better than women at everything. So, okay. So women are better at men than paid labor. 40-30. Every hour this woman works, she gets $40. Every hour the spouse works, he gets $30. Right? She's also better at taking care of the family. Every hour she spends taking care of the house and family, it's worth $20. Every hour he does, it's only worth $10. So do you see, in this case, absolute advantage technically is with the women. I'm not saying this is reality. I'm just saying let's take this as your most extreme uber feminist case. All right? Look what happens. In this case, women are better at paid labor compared to unpaid labor at a rate of 2:1. Men are better at paid labor compared to unpaid labor at 3:1. So comparative advantage tells you even if women are better at everything, it doesn't matter. What matters is the relative ratio, the comparative advantage to determine who's going to be best at what and what your final outcome should be. So you've got your original case, and then you've got 3 more cases. I want you to come prepared to class looking at them. But I want you to also think about what this means. What this means is that the reason that we have these patterns isn't a simplistic one about men are better, women are worse, men are worse. It's about the relative capacity to take care of things. And that is an empirical and sociological question. Is it really true, empirically and sociologically, that women are relatively better than men at household work? And the answer is qualified. I can see that when it comes to child rearing in very young years or breastfeeding, men can't do this. I can totally see that. I'm not going to say that there's something vicious and nasty if they don't do it. They can't breastfeed. It's just a biological thing. They can't hold children in their uterus because they lack one. No. So there are biological reasons for this pattern, but the question is, must this pattern hold for the entirety of your life? Or is it only a pattern that holds in the first 18 months to 3 years of a child's life? In which case, we can design policy to say, okay, for the first 18 months, for the first 20 months, whatever, let's adjust for this. But after that, don't treat women as if they're the only ones who can do this. But also, to be fair to men, don't treat them like they have no desire or capacity to care for their children. It might not be uterine for them, and they may not breastfeed, but they still do love their children. And even if you can't breastfeed a child, you can change its diaper. And so men have been showing up. So maybe our theory has to adapt itself to think through this. In parts of the world, we have paternity leave that's beginning to recognize that. And then once you do that, and maybe this comparative advantage is just for a brief period, 2-3 years of a career and a child's life. And we can design policy around that. So where I want to end with is comparative advantage is one explanation, but it's not a justification. It's an explanation that's asking you, what's going on? What's the issues? What can I do to adapt to these issues, and how can I help with this? And this help can be anything from support for pregnant mothers to paternity paternity leaves for fathers. So where I want to leave you with is our theory can explain the data, but the nature of the explanation is also the nature of your solution.